The sound of pounding woke me up suddenly, exactly at 2 o'clock in the morning. I heard my daughter screaming my name, completely out of control. I had changed all the locks a few days ago for a reason they didn't know, but one I knew perfectly well. I sat up in bed with my heart racing. My hands were trembling as I searched for my slippers in the dark. The pounding wouldn't stop. Every impact against the wood echoed through the whole house like a war drum. "Mum, open this door right now!" Lucy's voice tore through the walls. It was a desperate, furious scream, full of a rage I never thought I'd hear from my own daughter. The girl I had raised with so much love, the baby I had rocked in my arms through entire nights, was now howling my name as if I were her worst enemy. I stood up slowly. My knees cracked with the movement. 68 years weigh heavily on the body, especially when you've worked every day of your life without rest. I walked to the bedroom window and barely pulled back the curtain. From there I could see the main entrance. Lucy was in front of the door, hitting it with both fists. Her hair was loose, messy, and even though I couldn't see her face clearly, her movements betrayed her state. She was completely out of control. Next to her, David was standing with something in his hand. Soon after, my son-in-law lifted what he was holding. It was a hammer, a large carpenter's hammer that gleamed under the street lamp light. My blood ran cold. "We're coming in this time, whether you like it or not," David yelled with a cold voice that made my skin crawl. There was no doubt in his tone. There was no hesitation. It was a real, direct, dangerous threat. I closed the curtain and stepped back. My legs barely held me up. How had it come to this? How was my own daughter on the other side of that door trying to force her way into my house? Into the house her father and I built with decades of sacrifice. I took a deep breath. I couldn't let panic paralyze me. I had prepared for this moment. I knew it would come. For weeks I had anticipated this exact scene, even though I prayed every night to be wrong. The hammer blows began. The metallic sound against the lock made me jump. They were trying to force the entry. David was striking with systematic force, trying to break the mechanism. But I had installed new, reinforced maximum security locks. It wouldn't be that easy. "Mom, please!" Lucy had changed tactics. Now her voice sounded pleading, almost tearful. "We just want to talk to you. We're worried. Open the door." Lies. It was all lies. I knew exactly what they wanted. I had seen the documents. I had listened to their conversations when they thought I was asleep, or that my mind wasn't working well anymore. I knew exactly what they had planned for me. I stood calmly in the middle of the living room, wrapped in my bathrobe, barefoot on the cold floor. The house was dim, only lit by the faint light coming in from the street. My hands were no longer shaking. I had made a decision days ago, and now I just had to execute it. Then, behind me, a calm voice said, "Let them in, Audrey." "I'll open it." I turned around slowly. Amelia was standing next to the hallway entrance. My lifelong friend, the woman who had been my neighbor for 30 years, and who was now my trusted lawyer. She wasn't alone. Next to her was a man in a dark suit, with a briefcase in his hand, and two other people who remained in the shadows of the dining room. "Are you sure about this?" I asked her in a low voice, barely a whisper that got lost among the pounding that continued to resonate from outside. Amelia nodded firmly. Her grey eyes looked at me with a mixture of compassion and determination. "It's now or never, dear. They've already crossed every line. It's time for them to see the consequences." I nodded slowly. She was right. I couldn't keep hiding in my own house, living in fear of my own blood. If they had come all this way, at 2 o'clock in the morning, with a hammer and threats, there was no turning back. I walked toward the front door. Each step seemed to weigh a ton. My bare feet softly touched the floor as I approached the spot where, on the other side, waited two people I had once loved more than my own life. Finally, I heard David yell when my steps resonated near the entrance. "It's about time! Open up already!" My hand rested on the doorknob. It was cold, metallic, real. For a second, I hesitated. For one brief instant, I thought about turning around, going back to my room, covering my ears, and pretending none of this was happening. But I couldn't. I had already come too far. I turned the doorknob slowly. The mechanism unlocked with a soft click. I pulled the door inward and opened it wide. The street light flooded the entryway. Lucy and David froze in the doorway, eyes wide, mouths agape, looking not just at me, but at the people standing behind me. Amelia stepped forward, out of the shadows. The man in the suit did the same. The two other people moved to the sides, revealing their presence. Everyone stared at us in silence. "Good evening, Lucy." "Good evening, David," I said with a voice that sounded much firmer than I felt inside. "Please, come in. I think we have a lot to talk about." Lucy's face went white as paper. Her lips trembled, but no sound came out. David dropped the hammer. The metallic clang against the cement of the porch resonated in the silence of the early morning like a final sentence. "Before continuing with what happened that night, I need you to understand who I am. I need you to know where I come from and what I had to do to get here. Because only then will you understand why what was about to happen tore my soul apart, but was absolutely necessary. My name is Audrey Rivers, and I am 68 years old. I was born in a small town outside the city, in a wooden house with a tin roof where water leaked in every time it rained. My father was a day labourer, and my mother washed other people's clothes to survive. We were 6 siblings, and there was never enough food for everyone. I learned to sew when I was 8 years old, because it was the only way to have clothes that fit me properly. By 12, I was already sewing for neighbours to earn a few cents. At 15, I quit school to work full-time in a sewing workshop downtown. I earned $3 a day, working from 6 o'clock in the morning until 8 o'clock at night. I met Charles when I was 18 years old. He was a bus driver and passed in front of the workshop where I worked every morning. For 6 months, he waved to me every time he saw me waiting at the stop. One day, he finally dared to get off and talk to me. He had a shy smile and huge hands, calloused from work. We got married a year later in a simple ceremony. There was no white dress or fancy party. I wore a light blue dress I had sewn myself, and Charles wore the only suit he owned. The reception was at my parents' house with macaroni and cheese and soda. But it was the happiest day of my life, because I knew I had found a good, hard-working, honest man. The first years were incredibly tough. We lived in a rented 7-foot by 10-foot room. Charles worked double shifts driving the bus, and I continued sewing at the workshop during the day and took extra jobs at night. We saved every cent we could. We kept the money in a tin hidden under the mattress. When I got pregnant with Lucy, I thought we wouldn't survive. The pregnancy was difficult. I had to leave the workshop in the 7th month because I couldn't handle the weight and the nausea anymore. Charles started working weekends too. He slept 4 hours a night. I watched him wear himself out in front of my eyes, but he never complained. Lucy was born on a Tuesday in March at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It was a natural birth at the public hospital. When the nurse placed her in my arms, I cried with happiness and terror at the same time. She was so small, so fragile. How were we going to give her everything she needed? But we did it. Somehow we did it. Charles got better routes that paid more. I started sewing from home while taking care of Lucy. I worked with her asleep in a crib next to my sewing machine. Many nights I stayed up until dawn, finishing dresses, fixing pants, embroidering tablecloths. When Lucy turned 3 years old, we managed to buy a piece of land. It was a small lot on the outskirts, without utilities, without anything, but it was ours. It took us 2 years to build the house. Charles and I laid every brick with our own hands. He worked in construction on weekends, and I sold everything I could to buy materials. The house started out as just 2 rooms and a bathroom. We didn't have a real floor, just smoothed concrete. The walls weren't painted, but it was ours. No one could kick us out. No one could raise the rent on us. It was our home. Lucy grew up in that house. I watched her take her first steps on that cement floor. I heard her say her first words, leaning against those unpainted walls. Every Christmas, even if we didn't have money for expensive gifts, we made a special dinner and decorated with what we could. We had roasted turkey, mashed potatoes, and a green bean casserole. When Lucy started school, I made sure she had everything I never had. New supplies every year, a clean and ironed uniform, lunch money every day. Charles and I skipped meals so she would never go hungry. We bought the cheapest things for ourselves and the best we could afford for her. The years passed like this, in an exhausting but purposeful routine. Charles was still driving his bus. I had converted a room in the house into a small sewing workshop. I had regular clients who constantly brought me work. I also started renting 2 rooms to students to have extra income. With that money, we were able to expand the house. We added 2 more rooms, a dining room, and finally put in ceramic tiles and painted the walls. The house wasn't luxurious, but it was decent, clean, cozy. Every improvement represented months of savings and sacrifice. Lucy never understood that. For her, everything was always just there. Clean clothes in the closet, food on the table, a house with a solid roof. She never saw the nights Charles came home with terrible back pain from sitting and driving for 12 hours. She never saw my fingers, swollen and sore from sewing until the early morning. When she turned 15, we threw her a party. We spent almost $1,000 that we had saved for 2 years. She wanted a specific dress that cost $300. I bought it, even though it meant not fixing the leaking roof. I wanted to see her happy. I wanted to give her what I never had. Lucy finished high school with good grades. We wanted her to go to college, but she said she wasn't interested in studying anymore. She wanted to work, earn her own money, be independent. Charles and I respected her decision, even though it hurt. She got a job at a clothing store at the mall. She earned well for her age, but she spent everything. Brand name clothes, nights out with friends, new cell phones every year. We never asked her to contribute to the household expenses. We wanted her to enjoy her youth. When she was 23 years old, she met David. He was 5 years older. He claimed to be a lawyer, although we never really saw him practice. He worked in a small office doing minor legal paperwork. But he dressed well, spoke confidently, and Lucy was dazzled. From the beginning, something about David made me uncomfortable. The way he looked at our house, evaluating, calculating. The questions he asked about how much the land was worth, if we had debts, if I was still working. Charles told me it was my imagination, that he was just a curious young man. They got married 2 years later. The wedding was modest but respectable. We spent $5,000 we had saved for emergencies. David didn't contribute a cent. His family didn't show up much either. That should have been a warning sign too. At first they lived with us. They said it was temporary while they saved up for their own place. But the months passed and they weren't saving anything. David always had excuses. That there were unexpected expenses, that they needed a better car, that Lucy wanted to redecorate her room. Charles started to get tired of it, but I convinced him to be patient. She was our daughter. She needed our support. Eventually they would leave. But 2 years went by, and they were still there, living for free, not contributing, and getting more and more demanding. Then Charles got sick. He was 62 years old when the chest pains started. He ignored them for weeks until one day he collapsed in the middle of his route. They took him straight to the hospital. Massive heart attack. He survived, but the doctors said he couldn't keep working. His heart was too weak. It was devastating, not just emotionally, but financially. Charles's pension was minimal, barely $400 a month. I was still sewing, but at my age I couldn't work the same hours anymore. My hands constantly ached from arthritis. Charles lived 3 years more after that heart attack. 3 years in which I watched him slowly fade like a candle burning out. He could no longer work. He could barely walk without getting tired. He spent his days sitting in the living room armchair looking out the window, watching the life he could no longer fully live pass by. I became everything: wife, nurse, economic support for the house. I got up at 5 o'clock in the morning to prepare his breakfast and his medicines. Then I sewed for hours while he rested. In the afternoons, I gave him his treatments, walked with him in the yard, read him the newspaper because his eyes weren't seeing well anymore. The nights were the worst. Charles would wake up with nightmares, with pain, with the constant fear that the next heart attack would be the last. I would hold him in the dark and whisper that everything would be okay, even though inside I was dying of terror of losing him. Lucy and David were still living with us. They promised to help, but their help never materialized. David always had excuses, that his job didn't pay well, that they had expenses, that soon everything would get better. Meanwhile, they ate our food, used our utilities, lived under our roof, contributing almost nothing. There were times I thought about asking them to leave. Charles suggested it to me several times. But Lucy was my daughter. Every time I mustered the courage to talk to her, she would look at me with those eyes I had known since she was born, and my heart would melt. I thought they would eventually mature, that they would understand, that things would change. Charles's medications cost almost $300 a month. Insurance only covered a portion. I had to sell jewelry I had saved for years. A ring Charles gave me on our 10th anniversary, gold earrings that belonged to my mother. Each sale broke my heart, but there was no alternative. One night, 2 years after the heart attack, Charles called me into the room. He was sitting on the bed with a serious expression I hadn't seen before. He had an envelope in his hands. "Audrey, I need you to listen to me carefully," he said with a weak but firm voice. "I've been thinking a lot about what will happen when I'm gone." "Don't say that," I interrupted, tears in my eyes. "You're going to be fine. The doctor said if you take care of yourself, Audrey, please, we both know the truth." He took my hand gently. "I need you to promise me something. When I'm gone, protect this house. Protect everything we built. Don't let anyone take what is yours." I didn't fully understand what he meant at the time. I thought they were just the worries of a sick man. But Charles knew something I still refused to see. He had noticed things. David's glances evaluating the house, the whispered conversations that stopped when he entered, the casual comments about inheritance and wills. Charles died one winter morning. I was asleep next to him when his breathing simply stopped. There was no drama, no visible pain. His tired heart finally gave up. I woke up and knew immediately he was gone. The room felt different, colder, emptier. The funeral was simple. We didn't have money for anything elaborate. I used the last of our savings to give him a proper send-off. Lucy cried during the ceremony, but not as much as I expected. David was serious, appropriate, but his eyes were still calculating, observing who came, what they said, how they reacted. The house felt enormous without Charles. Every corner held his memory. The armchair where he sat still had the imprint of his body. His coffee mug was still on the shelf, his slippers next to the bed. For weeks I couldn't move them. It was as if by leaving them there, a part of him was still with me. Charles's pension stopped, of course. Now I only had my sewing work and the money I got from the 2 students who rented rooms. In total, about $600 a month, barely enough to eat and pay utilities. It was then that David began to show his true colors. A week after the funeral, he sat down with me at the kitchen table. Lucy wasn't there. She had gone out to buy something. "Audrey, we need to talk about the future," he began with a voice that pretended to be kind but sounded condescending. "This house is too big for you alone. The expenses are a lot, and at your age, maintaining all of this is complicated." "I manage fine," I replied firmly. "I've worked my whole life. I know how to manage my money." "Sure, sure. But think about it. You're almost 65 years old. How much longer will you be able to sew? What happens when your hands can't work anymore? When your eyesight fails?" He paused, calculated. "Lucy and I have been thinking. We could sell this house, get something smaller for you, more manageable, and with the leftover money we could make investments that would give you passive income." My blood ran cold. Sell the house? This house that your father-in-law and I built with our own hands? The house where my daughter was born? Don't look at it as losing something. Look at it as securing your future. We would take care of everything. You would just have to sign some papers. "I am not selling my house, David." His expression changed. The mask of concern cracked for a second, and I saw something cold in his eyes. "Fine, fine. It was just a suggestion. Think about it." He got up and left the kitchen. That night I couldn't sleep. Charles's words echoed in my head. "Protect this house. Don't let anyone take what is yours." I began to understand what he had seen in David that I had refused to see. The following months were a slow but constant escalation. David began to make comments about my memory. "Audrey, don't you remember? I told you yesterday. It's so strange that you forgot that. I mentioned it last week. You should see a doctor. These memory lapses aren't normal." The worst part was that Lucy backed him up. My own daughter began to treat me as if I were a confused old woman. "Mum, it didn't happen that way. Mum, you're mixing things up. Mum, I think you're a little disoriented." At first I doubted myself. I was 65 years old. Maybe my memory really was failing. But then I started to notice a pattern. The lapses they mentioned were always about important things. Conversations about money, about the house, about documents, never about trivial things. One day I found David in Charles's study looking through papers. When I walked in, he quickly closed a drawer. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "Lucy asked me to look for some old photos." He lied easily. "Where do you keep the albums?" "In the hallway closet, not here." I looked at him intently. "This is Charles's private desk. His personal documents are in here." "Oh, Audrey, I'm sorry, I didn't know. Since everything is family property," he shrugged and left the room. That night I checked the desk. Nothing seemed out of place, but something was unsettling me. I started hiding the most important documents somewhere else. The deed to the house, the papers for Charles's life insurance that had left me $10,000, my original will. Lucy turned 30 years old that year. For her birthday, she wanted a big party. I didn't have money for that, but she insisted. "Mum, it's my 30th birthday. It's special. Dad would have wanted us to celebrate." I used part of Charles's life insurance money, $1,200 for a party at an event hall. Lucy invited dozens of people. David took care of everything, acting like the perfect host. I sat in a corner watching them spend the money Charles had left for my old age. After the party, something definitely changed in David. He no longer bothered to hide things so much. The conversations about the house became more frequent, more insistent, more aggressive, and Lucy, my own daughter, had become his perfect echo. "Mum, David is right," she told me while we were having coffee in the kitchen. "This house is too much for you. Look how hard it is for you to climb the stairs. The yard is neglected because you can't keep it up anymore. The tenants take advantage of you because you're too nice. I can hire someone for the yard, and the tenants pay on time," I replied, feeling like every word from my daughter was like a stab wound. "But the money you spend on maintenance could be generating interest in the bank. David says that with a smart sale, you could live off the returns without ever working again." "I don't want to live anywhere else, Lucy. This is my house. You were born here. I lived here with your father for 40 years. She sighed impatiently, as if I were a stubborn child who wouldn't listen to reason. "Always so sentimental. Mum, sentimentality doesn't pay the bills." I kept quiet because I didn't recognize that woman. Where was my little girl? The one who hugged me when she had nightmares? The one who told me I was the best mum in the world? When had she become this cold person who only saw numbers and property? David started bringing friends to the house. He always introduced them as casual acquaintances, but I noticed how they surveyed every room with evaluating glances. One of them was a real estate agent. Another worked at a bank. A third was a notary. "I was just showing them the house, Audrey. We were talking about architecture," David said, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "They say it's a very well-located property. It must be worth easily about $150,000, maybe more." $150,000. Hearing that figure on his lips gave me chills, because I knew exactly what he was thinking. He and Lucy were living in my house for free, waiting for me to die, or for them to convince me to sell so they could take that money. One afternoon, when they thought I was taking my nap, I heard them talking in the dining room. I had gotten up to go to the bathroom, and their voices carried clearly down the hall. "It's been 6 months since Charles died," David was saying. "We need to speed things up. The longer we wait, the more risk there is that she'll do something stupid with the money." "Like what?" Lucy asked. "Like donating it to some church? Or leaving it all to some charity organization? Or worse, making a will that cuts us out?" "She wouldn't do that. I'm her only daughter." "Are you sure? She's been looking at you differently lately, like she suspects something." There was a silence. Then Lucy spoke with a shaky voice. "Do you think we should go ahead with the plan?" "Absolutely, I have everything ready. We just need her to sign the papers. We'll tell her they're insurance documents or bank forms. She'll trust you." "But if she finds out?" "She won't find out anything if we do it right. And if she starts to suspect, well, you know what to do. You start documenting her episodes of confusion. We call the doctor. We get him to certify that she's not in her right mind. We petition for a legal guardianship." I leaned against the hallway wall, feeling my legs give out. They were planning to have me declared incompetent. They wanted to take away my autonomy, my house, my life, and my own daughter was in agreement with this. I went back to my room in silence. I sat on the bed I had shared with Charles for decades and cried as I hadn't even cried at his funeral. Because this was worse than death. This was betrayal. This was seeing your only daughter become your worst enemy. That night I made a decision. I wasn't going to sit idly by waiting for them to destroy me. Charles had warned me. He had asked me to protect what was ours, and that's what I was going to do. The next day, when David and Lucy left, I searched the whole house. I looked in their rooms, their drawers, their belongings. I felt terrible doing it, but I needed to know what I was dealing with. What I found chilled my blood. In David's briefcase, hidden among other papers, were legal documents, a draft of a conservatorship application. My name was there, along with arguments about my supposed mental incapacity. There were notes on symptoms of dementia that I was supposedly showing. It was all a lie, every word, but it was so well documented it looked real. I also found contacts for private doctors, numbers underlined with the note, willing to cooperate for $2,000. They were planning to buy a false diagnosis. They were going to pay a doctor to certify that I wasn't in my right mind. There was more. Drafts of legal powers of attorney that would remove my control over my own finances. Bank documents about how to open mandatory joint accounts. Information on nursing homes and their monthly costs. I understood everything in that moment. The complete plan. They were going to have me declared incompetent, take control of my money and my house, sell everything, take the cash, and put me in some cheap assisted living facility where I could rot while they enjoyed what Charles and I had built. I photographed every document with trembling hands. I saved the photos on a USB drive that I hid in the hem of some old curtains. Then I put everything back exactly as it was. I couldn't confront them yet. Not without help. Not without a plan. If I faced them now, they would accelerate their timeline. They could become violent. I needed to be smarter than them. I remembered Amelia, my lifelong neighbor. We had been friends for 30 years. She had been a lawyer before retiring. If anyone could help me, it was her. The next day, pretending to go to the grocery store, I went to her house. Amelia greeted me with her usual warm smile, but her expression changed when she saw my face. "Audrey, what's wrong? You look terrible." I broke down. I told her everything, every detail, every conversation, every document I had found. Amelia listened in silence, her face growing more serious with every word. When I finished, she was thoughtful for long minutes. Finally, she spoke. "Audrey, this is very serious. This is conspiracy to commit fraud. It's elder abuse. They could go to prison for this." "I don't want to send my daughter to prison," I whispered. "I just want to protect myself. I want them to leave me alone." "I understand. But you need to act fast. If they present those documents to a judge and get a favorable medical opinion, even if it's fraudulent, it will cost you a lot to reverse it." Amelia took my hands. "You need to legally shield yourself, right now." Over the following weeks, Amelia became my secret ally. She helped me write a new will, a solid one that David and Lucy couldn't easily contest. We established a trust to protect the house. We changed all my bank accounts to different institutions where they didn't have access. "You also need a medical power of attorney," Amelia explained. "If you name someone you trust now, while you are clearly in your right mind, no judge can assign you a guardian in the future without that person's consent." "And who can I name? I don't have any other close family. You can name me if you trust me, or we can look for a professional administrator." I looked into her eyes. Amelia had been by my side through good times and bad. She had cried with me at Charles's funeral. She had watched my house when I was sick. "I name you if you accept this burden." "Of course I accept, dear friend." While Amelia and I worked silently to protect my assets, David and Lucy intensified their campaign. It was obvious now that they had decided to accelerate their plans. Although they didn't know I had already discovered them, the memory lapses they attributed to me became more elaborate. David would start conversations about topics we had never discussed, and then, in front of other people, he would scold me for not remembering them. "Audrey, I explained it to you 3 times last week. You really don't remember." Lucy invited some neighbors over for coffee. During the meeting, she dropped comments designed to sow doubt about my mental state. Mum gets very confused lately. Yesterday she couldn't remember if she had taken her medication. I had to check the bottles to be sure. I wasn't taking any regular medication. It was a blatant lie. But the neighbors looked at her with compassion, as if she were a dutiful daughter caring for her sick mother. The other day she went out without telling anyone, Lucy continued in a worried voice. We found her hours later walking in the park, completely disoriented. She told us she had gone to look for my dad. Poor thing. Sometimes she forgets he already died. Another lie. I had gone to the park that afternoon for a walk, as I usually did, but the way Lucy told it sounded like the story of a senile old woman. I saw the neighbors' looks fill with pity and concern. The most twisted part was that I couldn't defend myself without looking exactly like what they wanted me to look like. An older woman in denial about her mental decline. If I protested too much, if I got angry, it only reinforced their narrative. One afternoon, a man who introduced himself as Dr. Sanchez arrived at the house. David had invited him for a routine checkup without consulting me. "It's just to make sure everything is okay, Mum," Lucy said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "At your age, regular checkups are important." I knew exactly who that man was. I remembered the notes in David's briefcase, willing to cooperate for $2,000. This was the corrupt doctor they were going to pay to certify my incompetence. Dr. Sanchez asked me apparently innocent questions. What day was it? Who was the president? Could I remember 3 words he told me? But there was something false about the whole procedure. The way he wrote down my answers, the glances he exchanged with David, the condescending tone of his voice. I answered all his questions correctly. I remained calm, coherent, lucid. I didn't give him any ammunition he could use against me. When he finished, I saw the frustration on his face. "Everything seems to be in order for now," he finally said. "But at this age, things can change quickly. I would recommend more frequent evaluations." "How often?" David asked. "Every 2 weeks would be ideal." "That won't be necessary," I said firmly. "I have my own primary care doctor. If I need evaluations, he will take care of it." "Mom, Dr. Sanchez just wants to help," Lucy protested. I said no. This is my house, and these are my medical decisions. My voice sounded harsher than I intended, but I was furious. Did they really think I was so foolish as to not see what they were doing? Dr. Sanchez left shortly after. I heard David talking to him at the entrance. I couldn't hear the exact words, but the tone was one of frustration. I knew I had ruined that first attempt. That night, David and Lucy had a heated argument in their room. The walls of the house weren't very thick. I heard fragments of the conversation from my room. "I told you you're making it too obvious," Lucy was saying. "And what do you suggest? That we wait another 6 months? We don't have that time. She already has less than $10,000 left from the life insurance. Once that's gone, there will be nothing to take." "But what if she suspects?" "She doesn't suspect anything. She's a sentimental old woman. She thinks we're still the happy family we used to pretend to be." "Don't talk about my mother like that. Your mother is an obstacle between us and a better life, between us and $150,000 that we could be using right now." There was a long silence. Then Lucy spoke in a small voice. "Sometimes I wonder if we're doing the right thing." "Don't start that again. We've talked about this 1,000 times. That house is your inheritance. That money is yours by right. We're just speeding up the inevitable. And frankly, we'll be doing her a favor. At her age, living alone in this huge house is dangerous. She could fall, hurt herself, die alone, and no one would notice for days." "I guess you're right." "Of course I'm right. Trust me, honey. In 6 months, we'll be living in a modern apartment downtown. You'll quit that awful job at the store, and I can finally open my own office. All thanks to us having the guts to do what needed to be done. I moved away from the wall. I had heard enough. My own daughter had just justified my destruction as if it were an act of mercy. David had completely poisoned her. Or maybe, and this was what hurt the most, she had always had that capacity inside her, and David had only unleashed it. The next day, I went to Amelia's house again. I told her about Dr. Sanchez's visit and the conversation I had overheard. "They are accelerating the timeline," Amelia said worriedly. "We need to act before they present anything to a judge. What can I do?" "First, we're going to get your own medical evaluation. A complete neurological exam with a recognized specialist who certifies that you are in full use of your mental faculties. That will destroy any argument they try to make." Amelia put me in touch with a neurologist at the university hospital. Dr. Rodriguez tested me for 2 days. Memory tests, reasoning, cognitive functions, everything. The results were clear. My mind was perfectly healthy for someone my age. "Mrs. Rivers, you have the cognition of someone 10 years younger," Dr. Rodriguez told me. "There are absolutely no signs of dementia, cognitive impairment, or confusion. In fact, your results are above average." Amelia had the doctor prepare an official, certified, and dated report. We stored it in a safe place, along with all the other documents we were accumulating. "Now we need evidence of what they are planning," Amelia said. "The photos of the documents are a good start, but we need more." "Like what?" "Recordings, conversations where they admit their plans. We need them to incriminate themselves." The idea turned my stomach. Recording my own daughter conspiring against me seemed like a terrible betrayal. But then I remembered what I had heard the night before. They had already betrayed me. I was just defending myself. Amelia got me a small voice recorder that I could easily hide. For the next 2 weeks, I carried it with me constantly. I activated it every time David or Lucy started conversations about my health, about the house, about the future. I captured dozens of hours of conversations. David talking about how to handle my resistance. Lucy discussing what to do with my belongings once I was institutionalized. Both coldly calculating how much they could get from the sale of the house and how they would divide the money. The most painful part was a conversation between Lucy and a friend of hers who came to visit. I was in the yard, but the window was open and the recorder in my pocket captured everything. "And don't you feel bad?" the friend asked. "She's your mum." "At first, yes," Lucy admitted. "But David made me see things clearly. She had her life. She lived her years. Now it's our turn. Besides, in an assisted living facility, she'll be better cared for. She'll have nurses, activities, people her age. But if she doesn't want to go, sometimes you have to make tough decisions for the good of the people we love. When she's older, she'll understand. Or maybe not, if her mind keeps deteriorating. But at least she'll be safe." With every recording, with every captured conversation, I felt my heart break a little more. But I also felt a steely determination grow within me. I was not going to let them destroy me. I was not going to let them turn the last years of my life into a nightmare. Amelia and I met every few days to review the collected material. She took meticulous notes, organized the evidence, built a case that could be presented to a judge if necessary. "Audrey, with what you have, you could press criminal charges," she told me one afternoon while we listened to a particularly incriminating recording. "Conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted illegal appropriation, elder abuse. David could go to prison." "I don't want to destroy my daughter," I whispered. "I just want them to let me live in peace." "I understand, but you need to be prepared for the possibility of this escalating. They won't give up easily." She was right. As the weeks passed and I continued to resist their attempts at control, David became more aggressive. He no longer bothered to be subtle. One night he came home with papers in his hand. He dropped them onto the kitchen table in front of me. "I need you to sign this," he said without preamble. "What is it?" "A power of attorney. So Lucy and I can help you manage your finances. You're getting old, Audrey. It's time for younger people to take care of these things." I looked at the documents without touching them. "I'm not signing anything my own lawyer hasn't reviewed." "Your own lawyer? You don't have a lawyer." "I will get one if necessary." David leaned over the table, his face inches from mine. The mask of the concerned son-in-law had completely disappeared. "Listen to me carefully, old woman. You're going to sign these papers. Today, tomorrow, or next week, but you are going to sign them. Because if you don't do it nicely, we'll do it the hard way." "You are threatening me in my own house." "I'm telling you the reality. You can cooperate and make this easy for everyone, or you can resist and turn it into something ugly. Your choice." I stood up with my legs trembling, but my voice firm. "Get out of my kitchen. Now." "This is my house too. I live here. You live here because I allow it, and that can change at any moment." David let out a bitter laugh. "You're going to kick me out? Me and your daughter? Go ahead. Try it. Let's see what a judge says when you tell him about your deteriorating mental state, about how you threaten us, about how you can't take care of yourself. Get out of here." "I'm leaving. But this isn't over, Audrey. Not by a long shot." He grabbed the papers and left the kitchen, leaving me trembling with fear and rage. That night I called Amelia. "I need to change the locks tomorrow." "Are you sure? That's going to provoke a direct confrontation." "It already did, Amelia. He threatened to have me declared incompetent if I don't sign papers that give him control of my money. I can't keep living like this, in fear in my own house." "All right. I'll call a reliable locksmith. But Audrey, when you change those locks, they are going to react, probably violently. You need to be prepared." "I am." The next day, when David and Lucy left for work, the locksmith arrived. In 2 hours, he had changed all the locks on the house. Front doors, back door, room doors. Amelia came and stayed with me. "What are you going to do when they come back?" she asked. "I'm going to tell them they are no longer welcome here, that they have a week to collect their things." "They are going to fight. Let them fight. This is my house." Lucy arrived first, around 6 o'clock in the evening. She tried to open the door with her key. I heard her turn it once, twice, 3 times with no result. Then she knocked. "Mum, the door won't open. Did you change the lock?" I opened the door but stood in the doorway, blocking the entrance. "Yes, I changed the lock." "Why would you do that?" "Because this is my house, and I need to feel safe in it." "Safe? Safe from what?" "From your own family. From people who are trying to rob me. From people who want to declare me incompetent and put me in an assisted living facility to take my house." Lucy's face paled. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. I know everything, Lucy. I found the documents. I listened to the conversations. I know exactly what you and David have been planning." "Mum, you're confused. This is exactly what we were talking about. You're having paranoid episodes." "I'm not confused and I'm not paranoid. I have evidence, photographs, recordings, documents, everything." Lucy stepped back as if I had hit her. "You've been spying on us." I was defending myself. There's a difference. Just then, David arrived. He assessed the situation immediately. "What's going on here?" "Your mother-in-law has gone crazy," Lucy said with a trembling voice. "She changed the locks and is accusing us of horrible things." David approached the door. Audrey, open this door right now. We live here. You can't lock us out. You have a week to collect your belongings. We will coordinate supervised times for you to enter and take your things. After that, I don't want to see you again. This is ridiculous. You don't have any right. I have every right. This house is in my name. You have been living here out of my charity, and that charity is over. David took out his phone. I'm calling the police. This is an illegal eviction. We have rights as residents. Call them, please, call them. I'd love to explain to the police about your plan to declare me incompetent, about the doctor you tried to bribe, about the fraudulent documents you prepared. David's hand froze over the phone. We stared at each other for long seconds. In his eyes, I saw pure, undisguised hatred. This isn't going to end here, he said in a low, threatening voice. I'm sure it won't. I'll see you in a week for the collection of your things. I closed the door and bolted it. I heard yelling on the other side. Lucy was crying. David was cursing. They pounded on the door for several minutes. Amelia hugged me while I trembled. You did well, she whispered. You were brave. I didn't feel brave. I felt broken. I had just kicked my only daughter out of my house. The girl I had raised, to whom I had given everything, for whom I had sacrificed so much. And she had paid me back with betrayal. Over the next few days, David and Lucy tried everything. They called distant relatives, telling them their version of events. That I was senile, paranoid, being manipulated by Amelia. Some relatives called me, concerned. I explained the situation calmly and offered to show them the evidence if they wanted. Most didn't want to get involved. They talked to the neighbors, sowing more doubt about my mental health. I saw how some neighbors looked at me with pity when I went out. Others avoided my gaze completely. They went to the bank where I had my savings account and tried to access my funds using old documents where they were listed as emergency contacts. The bank, fortunately, refused without a court order. A week later, just as we had agreed, they arrived with a truck to collect their things. Amelia had hired 2 large men as witnesses and security. She didn't want there to be any altercation. The morning we agreed for them to collect their belongings dawned cold and grey. I had barely slept. I spent the whole night going over every decision that had led me to this moment, wondering if there would have been any other way to resolve this without reaching this point of total rupture. Amelia arrived early with the 2 men she had hired. Their names were Alex and John, both from a private security company. They were professional, serious, and their mere presence made me feel safer. Are you ready? Amelia asked me, taking my hand. No, but we have to do it anyway. David and Lucy arrived exactly at 10 o'clock in the morning with a rented van. They brought cardboard boxes and a friend of David's to help with the heavy furniture. When they saw Alex and John standing at the entrance, David clenched his jaw. Seriously? Audrey? Security guards? Are you that afraid of us? It's not fear. It's caution. You have 3 hours to take your things. Everything in your room you can take. Nothing else. Lucy walked past me without looking. Her eyes were red and swollen, as if she had spent days crying. A part of me wanted to hug her, console her, tell her everything would be okay. But the stronger part, the part that had seen the documents and heard the recordings, remained firm. They started taking out boxes, clothes, shoes, personal items. I watched them from the living room while Amelia took photographs of everything that left the house. Documentation, she had explained to me, in case they later say you kept something that belonged to them. David tried to enter Charles's study. Alex blocked his path. That room is not included, he said in a quiet but firm voice. I have personal documents in there. You have nothing in there. That room has been locked since Audrey changed the locks. You're lying. I worked in that study. Without permission, checking documents that didn't belong to you. Audrey is aware of everything. I saw David's face turn red with rage. For a moment I thought he was going to try to force his way in, but John also approached. David was not foolish. He backed down. "This is abuse," he mumbled through clenched teeth. "Elder abuse. You're manipulating her," he yelled at Amelia. "Taking advantage of a confused older woman to take her house." Amelia smiled coldly. "You can file a complaint if you want. In fact, I encourage you to do so. It will be interesting when the judge sees all the evidence we have against you." David shut up. He knew he was on dangerous ground. The tension increased when Lucy started taking things that clearly weren't hers. A vase that had belonged to my mother. Some framed family photographs. When she tried to take an antique clock that Charles had inherited from his father, I intervened. "That doesn't belong to you, Lucy." "It was Dad's. Now it's mine." "No, it's not. Your father's will specified that all his personal belongings remained in my custody. I will leave that clock to your daughter, Catherine, when she is old enough." "My daughter? Now you remember you have a granddaughter." Lucy's voice was laden with venom. "You haven't let her visit for weeks." "I haven't let her come because you were trying to use her as an emotional tool. The last time she was here, David asked her to convince me to sign papers. She is 9 years old, Lucy. You were manipulating a child." Lucy dropped the clock on the table. Her hands were shaking. "You have become a horrible person. Bitter. Selfish. I have become a person who defends herself. There is a difference. You always gave us everything. What changed?" "That I found out you wanted to rob me. That you planned to declare me incompetent and put me in an assisted living facility. That my own daughter was willing to betray me for money." "It was for your own good," Lucy cried. Tears ran down her face. "You're old, Mum. This house is too much for you. You could fall, hurt yourself. You need professional care." "What I need is for my daughter to love me unconditionally, but it seems that is too much to ask." The silence that followed was brutal. Lucy looked at me with a mixture of pain and rage that I will never forget. Then she turned around and continued packing. 2 hours later, the van was almost full. David tried one last move. He took some papers out of his pocket. "I have here a letter from a certified psychiatrist stating that Audrey Rivers shows evident signs of cognitive impairment and requires immediate legal supervision." Amelia held out her hand. "Let me see that." David handed her the document with a satisfied smile. Amelia read it and then burst out laughing. "This is such a bad forgery, it's almost comical. The doctor who supposedly signed it lost his license 2 years ago for fraud. It's in the public records. Did you really think this would work?" David's smile disappeared. "It's a valid legal document. It's trash paper you could use to light your fireplace. And the fact that you try to use it only adds more evidence to the case Audrey could bring against you." Amelia handed the papers back to him. "Try to present this to a judge. Please. It will be fun to watch you get arrested for presenting false documents to a court." David crumpled the papers and put them in his pocket. "This doesn't end here, Audrey. I'm going to fight. I'm going to prove you're not in your right mind. I'm going to get control of this house and your money. And when I do, you're going to regret having treated me like this." "The threats were also recorded," Amelia said, pointing to her phone on the table. "Keep talking. You're building our case for us." They finally finished. The van was full of boxes and furniture. David got into the cab without another word. Lucy stood in the doorway, looking at me with pleading eyes. "Mum, please, we can still fix this. We can talk. Reach an agreement. It doesn't have to end like this. You should have thought of that before you conspired with your husband to rob me. It was never about robbing. That house is my inheritance. That money will eventually be mine. You just wanted to hasten my death, anticipate my incapacity, rob me of my last years of dignity. It wasn't like that. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. Now go. And don't come back unless it's to truly apologize. No half apologies, no justifications. A real apology. Lucy opened her mouth as if to say something else, but finally turned around and walked toward the van. I watched her get in, and then watched the vehicle drive away down the street until it disappeared. I stood in the entrance of my house for long minutes. The house that Charles and I built. The house where we had raised our daughter. The house that now felt empty and cold without her. "Audrey, come inside," Amelia said softly. "You're shaking." She was right. I was trembling from head to toe. Not from the cold, but from the emotional discharge of what had just happened. I let Amelia guide me to the sofa. "You did well," she said as she brought me hot tea. "I know it was hard, but you did well. It doesn't feel good. It feels like I lost my daughter." "You lost her a long time ago, dear. You're just realizing it now." I spent the next few days in a fog. I walked through the house that suddenly seemed too big, too silent. The room where Lucy and David had lived was empty, except for some stains on the wall where they had hung pictures. I looked at them for hours, wondering how I had gotten to this point. I thought that with their departure, peace would come, that I could finally breathe easy in my own house. But it wasn't like that, because David had been right about one thing. This wasn't over, and he wasn't the type to give up easily. 3 days after they left, the real war began. David filed a lawsuit petitioning for my conservatorship due to mental incapacity. The legal document arrived at my house on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a court officer who looked at me with pity as he asked me to sign the receipt. I called Amelia immediately. She came and read the documents with an increasingly serious expression. "This is serious, Audrey. They are alleging that you pose a danger to yourself, that you have shown erratic behavior, paranoia, and that you need a legal guardian to manage your affairs." Can they do that? After everything they did? They can try, and with the wrong judge, they could succeed, at least temporarily. Amelia put the papers on the table. "But we have advantages. We have your recent neurological evaluation. We have evidence of their conspiracy. And we have time to prepare a solid defense." The following days were a nightmare of legal preparations. Amelia put me in touch with a lawyer specializing in family law and elder protection. His name was Joseph Harris, and he had a reputation for being relentless in court. "Mrs. Rivers," he told me in our first meeting, "I'm going to be completely honest with you. These cases are difficult because judges tend to be cautious. They prefer to err on the side of protection, even if it means limiting the freedoms of perfectly capable people. So I could lose. Not if we present a solid case. And you have a very solid case. But I need you to be prepared for this to get ugly. They are going to attack your character, your mental health, your judgment. They are going to bring witnesses who will say horrible things about you." He was right. The smear campaign began almost immediately. David contacted everyone we knew, telling them his version of events. According to him, I was a confused old woman who had been manipulated by Amelia, who supposedly wanted to take my house. Some neighbors started avoiding me completely. Others looked at me with a mixture of pity and distrust. A lady with whom I had had coffee for years stopped me in the street. "Audrey, is it true that you kicked your own daughter out of your house in the middle of the night?" It wasn't in the middle of the night. It was a legal and orderly process. "But she's your daughter. Your own flesh and blood. How can you do that to her? She was trying to rob me. She planned to declare me incompetent to take my house. The woman shook her head. Oh, Audrey, Lucy would never do something like that. She has always been so good to you. I think you're confused, dear. And it was like that with everyone. David and Lucy had built such a convincing narrative that people believed it without question. The poor, dutiful daughter trying to care for her senile mother. The wicked neighbour taking advantage of a vulnerable old woman. The worried son-in-law just wanting to protect his family. Things got worse when David managed to get some distant relatives to sign statements supporting his version. A third cousin I hadn't seen in 10 years wrote a letter to the judge saying she had always noticed problems with my memory. A distant nephew declared that at family gatherings I seemed confused and disoriented. They are lying, I told Joseph as we reviewed the statements. I barely know these people. I haven't spoken to them in years. I know, but their statements go into the file anyway. We will have to prove that they have no real knowledge of your current state. Lucy started using Catherine, my granddaughter, as an emotional weapon. She posted photos on social media of the girl crying, with messages about how much she missed her grandmother, but that I refused to see her. I received messages from people I didn't even know, accusing me of being a cruel and heartless grandmother. The truth was that I was dying to see Catherine. I missed her every day. But Amelia and Joseph warned me that any contact could be used against me. They will say you tried to manipulate her, Joseph explained to me, that you tried to convince her to say things in your favor. It's better to wait until after the hearing. One night, around 11 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I looked out the window and saw a police car. My heart raced as I opened the door. Mrs. Audrey Rivers, one of the officers asked. Yes, that's me. We received a welfare call. Someone reported that you might be in danger, that you've been behaving strangely and worryingly. Who reported that? I can't disclose that information, ma'am. Can we come in and verify that everything is all right? I let them in. They walked through the house while I explained the situation. I showed them the legal documents, David's lawsuit, the evidence of their conspiracy. The officers looked at each other. Ma'am, it seems you are in the middle of a complicated family dispute, one of them finally said. But you look perfectly capable and lucid. We don't see any reason to intervene. Can you put that in a report? We will file a report of the visit indicating that we found everything in order. After they left, I knew who had made that call. It was another tactic by David to create a record of concerns about my well-being, but at least this time it had backfired on them. The weeks passed, and the tension mounted. David presented more documents, more evidence of my supposed incapacity. He got statements from anyone willing to sign. Some did so because they truly believed his version. Others, I suspected, were paid something in return. Joseph worked tirelessly preparing our defense. He gathered testimonies from my sewing clients, who attested to my lucidity and competence. The owner of the grocery store where I shopped wrote a letter describing our normal and coherent conversations. My primary care doctor provided records showing I was in good health for my age. But our strongest weapon, Joseph would say, are the recording and the documents you found. That clearly shows they conspired against you. When the judge hears those conversations, he will see who the real manipulators are here. The date of the hearing was set for 6 weeks after the initial filing. 6 weeks that felt like 6 years. I barely slept. I ate little. I spent the nights going over every conversation, every decision, wondering if I had done anything differently that could have prevented all of this. Amelia stayed with me many nights. She made me tea, forced me to eat, listened to me when I needed to talk. You're going to get through this, she told me. You're stronger than they think. 2 weeks before the hearing, Lucy appeared at my door. She was alone, without David. She looked terrible, haggard, with deep circles under her eyes. "Mum, please, we need to talk." "I have nothing to talk about with you. Any communication must be through my lawyer. Please, just 5 minutes." Tears were in her eyes. "I beg you." Against my better judgment, I let her in. We sat in the living room, separated by yards of distance that felt like miles. "David doesn't know I'm here," she began. "If he finds out, he'll be really angry." "And you care about that? You've become his perfect puppet." "It's not like that. I I thought we were doing the right thing. David convinced me that it was for your own good, that we were protecting you." "Protecting me? Planning to rob me is protecting me." Lucy covered her face with her hands. I know. I know. I've been so confused. David says one thing, you say another. I don't know what's true anymore. The truth is in the documents I found, in the conversations I recorded, in the real intentions behind all your actions. If I withdraw my support for the lawsuit, could you forgive me? My heart skipped a beat. Would you do that? Would you go against David? There was a long silence. I saw the internal struggle on her face. Finally, she shook her head. "I can't. He's my husband. I have to support him." "Then you came here to ask for my forgiveness, but you're not willing to do anything to earn it. I came here to ask you to withdraw the charges, to let David manage your finances. I promise we will take good care of you. You will never lack anything." I stood up. "Get out of my house." "Mom." "Get out. You came here to try to manipulate me one more time, to make me feel guilty so I would give in. But it's not going to work, Lucy. Not this time." She got up slowly. At the door, she turned around. "David says if you don't cooperate, he's going to destroy you in court. He has witnesses, documents, everything prepared. He says you're going to lose." The hearing finally arrived. I put on my best clothes, a simple but respectable suit I had worn for Charles's funeral. Amelia accompanied me to the courthouse along with Joseph. My hands were shaking as we went up the stairs of the building. Inside the courtroom, on the other side, were David and Lucy with their lawyer. David looked at me with a cold, calculating smile. Lucy kept her gaze down, unable to meet my eyes. The judge was a man in his 50s, with a serious expression. He first listened to David's arguments. His lawyer presented an elaborate case about my supposed mental decline, my erratic behavior, my urgent need for legal supervision. They brought witnesses. The distant cousin who testified about my supposed memory lapses. A neighbor David had convinced that I had acted strangely. They even presented the notes from Dr. Sanchez, the corrupt doctor, although Joseph immediately destroyed them by showing that he had lost his license. "Your Honor," David's lawyer argued, "we are talking about a 68-year-old woman who lives alone in a big house, who has kicked out her only family, who shows clear signs of paranoia by believing that her loved ones are conspiring against her. She needs protection, even if it is from herself." Then it was our turn. Joseph began by presenting my neurological evaluation from Dr. Rodriguez. The results were irrefutable. I was mentally sound, competent, lucid. "Your Honor," Joseph said firmly, "what we have here is not a confused older woman who needs protection. It is a perfectly capable woman defending herself against a calculated attempt at robbery and fraud." Then he began to present the evidence. The photographs of the documents I found in David's briefcase. The drafts of the conservatorship application prepared months before filing the official lawsuit. The notes about doctors willing to cooperate for money. I watched the judge's face grow more serious with each document. David shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His lawyer tried to object. But Joseph had an answer for everything. Then came the recording things. Joseph played the most incriminating conversations. David's voice talking about accelerating the inevitable and keeping $150,000. Lucy discussing institutionalizing me in a cheap assisted living facility, both coldly calculating how they would divide my assets. The silence in the room was absolute. Every word of those recordings fell like a bomb. I saw Lucy turn pale, hiding her face in her hands. David maintained a stone mask, but his fists were clenched so tightly that his knuckles were white. "Your Honor," Joseph continued, "Mrs. Rivers is not paranoid. She is not confused. She discovered a real and documented plan to strip her of her autonomy and her assets. Everything she has done has been to legitimately defend herself against an ongoing fraud." The judge called a recess. 30 minutes that felt eternal. Amelia held my hand while we waited. We didn't talk. There was nothing to say. When we returned to the courtroom, the judge had his decision. "I have carefully reviewed all the evidence presented, and I must say that I have rarely seen such a clear case of attempted elder abuse disguised as family concern." I took a breath for the first time in what felt like hours. "The application for conservatorship is completely denied. Mrs. Audrey Rivers is clearly in full use of her mental faculties and has every right to manage her own affairs." The judge looked directly at David. "Furthermore, I am ordering that a copy of this file be sent to the district attorney's office to evaluate whether criminal charges are warranted for attempted fraud, falsification of documents, and conspiracy." David stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous. We only wanted to protect her." "Sir, I suggest you sit down and remain silent before I cite you for contempt," the judge said, with a voice of steel. "Your behavior and that of your wife, according to the evidence presented, constitutes a premeditated attempt to illegally appropriate Mrs. Rivers' assets. You will be lucky if you only face civil consequences." The room erupted in murmurs. The judge's gavel pounded for order. I looked at Lucy. She was crying silently, completely destroyed. Part of me wanted to go and comfort her, but the stronger part stayed put. We left the courthouse under a grey sky. Joseph was satisfied, but professional. "We won, but this probably doesn't end here. They can appeal, although with the evidence we have it would be useless. And the criminal charges, that depends on the district attorney's office. With what the judge saw, it's likely they will at least investigate." In the following weeks, life slowly began to normalize. David and Lucy did not appeal. Their lawyer probably advised them that it would be throwing away money. The district attorney's office opened an investigation into the fraudulent documents and the attempted bribery of the doctor. A month later, I received a call. David had been arrested. Not for the case with me, but because the investigation discovered he had committed similar frauds with other clients in his legal practice. Apparently, I was not his first victim. The difference was that I had fought back. Lucy called me that night. She was crying so hard she could barely speak. "Mum, David is in jail. I don't have money for bail. I lost my job because I spent all my time in court. I don't know what to do." My first instinct was to help her. 43 years of being a mother don't erase easily. But then I remembered everything. The recorded conversations, the plans to lock me up, the coldness with which they had discussed my fate. "Lucy, I'm sorry for what you're going through, but I can't help you. How can you be so cruel? I'm your daughter. And you're the one who tried to rob me, the one who conspired to declare me incompetent, the one who chose money over her own mother. It was David. He manipulated me. He convinced me. You are an adult woman, Lucy. You had choices. You chose to follow him. Now you must live with the consequences of that choice." Then that's it. You abandon me when I need you the most. I am not abandoning you. I am letting you face the consequences of your actions. It is the most important lesson I can give you now." She hung up. She didn't call again. The months passed. David was sentenced to 3 years in prison for multiple counts of fraud. Lucy moved to a small apartment with Catherine. She got a job at a clothing store again, earning barely enough to survive. I was still in my house, the house that Charles and I built. I was still sewing, though less than before. I had converted a room into a small workshop where I gave sewing classes to young people in the neighborhood. It kept me busy, useful. Amelia continued to be my best friend. We had dinner together several times a week. We played cards. We talked about life, about mistakes, about second chances. The evenings were the hardest. When the sun began to set and the house filled with long shadows, that was when the loneliness weighed on me the most. When I wondered if it had been worth it, if protecting my dignity justified losing my daughter. I didn't have a clear answer. Some days I thought yes, that I had done the right thing. Other days I woke up crying, missing the girl Lucy had been before David poisoned her. 6 months after David's sentencing, on a rainy autumn afternoon, the doorbell rang. I opened the door and found Catherine standing on the threshold. She was 10 years old now, taller, with Lucy's face when she was a child. "Hi, Grandma," she said timidly. "Catherine, what are you doing here? Where is your mother?" "She's waiting in the car. She told me to ask if we could talk to you." I looked toward the street. Lucy's old car was parked in front of my house. I could see her silhouette in the driver's seat. "She says she doesn't expect you to forgive her," Catherine continued, "but that she wants to try to rebuild something, even if it's small, even if it takes years." My heart broke and mended 1,000 times in that moment. I looked at my granddaughter, so innocent, so unaware of all the darkness that had happened between her mother and me. "Tell your mother she can come in, but only if she's ready to tell the truth. No excuses, no justifications, the complete truth." Catherine ran back to the car. I watched her talk to Lucy. Then slowly my daughter got out of the vehicle and walked toward the house. She looked broken, thinner, with deep lines of fatigue on her face. When she reached the door, her eyes finally met mine. "Mum, I tried to rob you. I agreed to horrible plans. I chose money over you. You deserve to hate me." "I don't hate you, Lucy. I have loved you every day of your life. But I can't trust you. I don't know if I ever will again." "I understand. And I'm not asking you to trust me. Just, could we try something? Supervised visits with Catherine, occasional conversations. I'm not after your money. I'm not after your house. I don't want my daughter to grow up without knowing her grandmother." I looked at her for long seconds. Amelia had warned me about this. "It will be a trap," she had said. "She will try to manipulate you again." But looking at Lucy now, I didn't see manipulation. I saw a broken woman who finally understood the magnitude of what she had lost. "We can try," I finally said, "but with conditions, clear boundaries, and at the first sign of manipulation or deceit, it ends." "I accept any condition." I don't know if I will ever fully forgive her. I don't know if our relationship will ever heal. But as I watched Catherine smile, knowing she could visit her grandmother, I knew I was at least willing to try. That night, alone in my house, I sat in the armchair where Charles used to sit. I talked to him like I sometimes did. "I did it, love. I protected what was ours, but it cost so much." Tears ran down my face. Did I do the right thing? Was it worth it? There was no answer, of course, just the silence of the house and the weight of all my decisions. But I survived. I kept my dignity. I protected my autonomy. And although the price was devastating, I proved that a 68-year-old woman could defend herself against those who sought to destroy her. The victory didn't feel glorious. It felt exhausting, painful, melancholic. But it was mine, and no one could ever take it away from me.